in the Eternal City, an end of a match that will live for eternity. Gauff somehow finds a way to get past Andreeva for a fifth time, and she moves back into the semi-finals here in Rome.
Just over 13 minutes in that last return game got Coco Gauff over the line. The relief on her face. That is a lot of time out on court. You gotta say, Mirra can hold her head high. She played well, had lapses of when she was playing her best tennis, where she made some unforced errors mentally in shot selection, but she had the right idea to at least push Coco to a third set, which she hasn't done in a long time.
Yeah, given what...
There is an ancient, unforgiving cruelty baked deeply into the crushed red brick of...
Beneath the worn red clay of the Foro Italico lives a ruthless kind of brutality that shows no sympathy for youth, rising talent, or even the elegance of flawless shot-making. This surface has a vicious habit of tempting hopeful challengers with the thrilling illusion that triumph is finally within reach, only to tear it away without mercy the instant belief begins to settle in. If anyone wishes to witness the purest and most painful example of shattered hope in professional sports, they do not need lessons or explanations from any book. All they have to do is remember what unfolded tonight beneath the glowing lights of center court.
Please do not scream, it's really causing a disturbance. Thank you.
E spinge Andreeva in uscita dal servizio, 40-30.
40-30. 40-30.
Gauff molto indietro, ma indovina la profondità su questo rovescio. Sì. Sembrava destinata a uscire, infatti poi Andreeva gioca, non dico con sufficienza, però comunque in mezza volata di diritto, nella speranza ovviamente che uscisse. Parità. Seconda.
No.
Niente da fare, non passa. Il rovescio rallentato di Gauff che non riesce ancora ad arrivare a match point, o meglio, c'era già arrivata ma non in questo game. Seconda chance di 5 pari.
Un po' passiva Gauff in questo.
To understand the full emotional chaos of this unforgettable quarterfinal battle, you have to examine the dramatic and draining clash between world number 3 Coco Gauff and 19-year-old Russian sensation Mirra Andreeva. Future record books and casual fans will glance at the final score of 4-6, 6-2, 6-4, and casually label it another standard comeback victory for the American star. They will see the higher seed defeating the lower seed and assume the expected order of the WTA world remained untouched. But reducing this brutal encounter to simple numbers completely ignores the intense psychological battle that unfolded on the Roman clay. This was far beyond an ordinary tennis match. It felt like a failed rebellion. A fearless teenager marched into the arena, pushed the reigning queen to the edge, sensed the possibility of a historic upset, and then watched that dream slowly disappear beneath the relentless force of Coco Gauff's iron mentality and championship toughness. To truly grasp the suffocating pressure surrounding this showdown, you first have to acknowledge the invisible burden already hanging over center court before the opening serve was struck. The shadow of the head-to-head record loomed over everything. Before this quarterfinal, Gauff and Andreeva had faced each other 4 times on tour, and all 4 meetings ended with the American walking away victorious. 4 encounters. 4 defeats for the Russian prodigy. At the highest level of professional tennis, a one-sided rivalry eventually transforms from a statistic into a mental prison. It creeps deep into a player's confidence and refuses to let go. Every time Andreeva stared across the net at Gauff, she no longer saw another athlete. She saw an unsolved puzzle, an overwhelming obstacle that kept rejecting every answer she tried to produce. So when the young Russian stepped onto the clay in Rome, she was fighting for far more than a place in the Italian Open semifinals. She was battling for freedom from the psychological grip that had haunted her through every previous defeat against the American star. And for nearly the first hour of this tense encounter, the entire tennis world watched in shock as Mirra Andreeva began tearing down that mental wall piece by piece. The opening set was a fearless display of aggressive clay court precision from the teenager. Andreeva captured the first set 6-4, and the way she controlled it immediately created panic inside the American camp. She did not play like someone trapped by past failures. She played with ruthless confidence, as though she had finally discovered the solution to the puzzle. She attacked early from the baseline, absorbed Gauff's heavy topspin with remarkable timing, and drove her backhand deep into the corners with stunning accuracy. She forced the world number 3 into exhausting rallies that stretched beyond 20 shots, and somehow the teenager kept winning them. When Andreeva closed out the opening set 6-4, a stunned silence swallowed the stadium. The unthinkable suddenly felt real. The curse appeared to be ending. The Russian prodigy had struck first, and Coco Gauff was staring directly at the possibility of a shocking early exit from Rome. But this is the exact moment where the beautiful fantasy of the fearless underdog crashes headfirst into the ruthless reality of a true Grand Slam champion. There is a reason Coco Gauff sits among the very best in the world. There is a reason she already carries the crown of a US Open champion at such a young age. It is not only because of her explosive movement or the raw power behind her backhand. It is because Gauff possesses an almost terrifying mental tolerance for pain, pressure, and suffering that very few players in modern women's tennis have ever displayed. When she is cornered, when momentum slips away, when the stadium begins sensing a monumental upset, and when her opponent is producing the performance of a lifetime, Gauff does not mentally collapse. She becomes even more dangerous. She shuts everything out emotionally and forces her opponent into a war of endurance that few can survive. As the second set unfolded, Gauff suddenly activated an entirely different level of intensity that completely transformed the atmosphere of the match. The statistics only begin to explain the destruction that followed. The scoreboard reveals that Gauff stormed through a devastating run of 5 consecutive games, but the true horror for the Russian teenager was hidden inside the point streaks. At the peak of her dominance, Gauff captured 9 straight points against the world number 8. 9 consecutive points at this level is not just momentum shifting hands. It is psychological devastation. Gauff quickly realized she could not overpower Mirra Andreeva from the baseline while the teenager was overflowing with confidence, so she changed the entire battle. She decided to outlast her physically, mentally, and emotionally. Gauff elevated her defense to an almost inhuman level, sliding across the clay into impossible positions and somehow sending heavy looping shots deep into the corners at the final possible moment. Rally after rally, Andreeva was forced to strike 3, 4, sometimes even 5 attacking shots just to stay alive in a single exchange. Slowly, the frustration on the Russian's face became impossible to hide. She had already thrown her best punches. She had produced shots that would finish points cleanly against nearly anyone else on tour, yet Gauff continued tracking everything down as if she was silently demanding even more. The American star seized the second set 6-2, completely destroying the momentum Andreeva had built earlier and dragging the contest into a brutal deciding set. To fully understand how this war was ultimately won and lost in the third set, the statistical breakdown becomes absolutely essential. The first area demanding attention is the violent chaos surrounding the breakpoint opportunities throughout the match. This was never a contest controlled by dominant serving. It was a relentless battle where both players constantly attacked each other's service games without mercy. Across all 3 sets, Gauff created an incredible 17 breakpoint chances while Andreeva generated 12 of her own. That means there were 29 separate moments during this match where one player stood only a single point away from completely breaking the other's serve. It was pure trench warfare from beginning to end. Coco Gauff managed to capitalize on 7 of her 17 breakpoint opportunities, while Mirra Andreeva converted 5 of her 12 chances. 12 total service breaks in a single quarterfinal at this level tells you everything about the violent nature of this encounter. The return game completely controlled the direction of the battle. The heavy, slow Roman clay combined with the damp evening conditions stripped much of the power away from the serve, allowing both players to step aggressively inside the baseline and immediately seize control of rallies from the very first shot. No advantage ever felt secure. Every service game became a stressful, exhausting survival test, demanding total concentration and emotional discipline. In a match where serves are constantly under attack, the winner is usually the player who refuses to mentally crack first. The serving numbers themselves reveal a fascinating tactical contrast between the two competitors. Gauff, fully aware that her second serve has often been viewed as the weakest area of her game, made an intelligent adjustment by prioritizing consistency and first serve percentage over reckless power. The statistics show she landed an impressive 72% of her first serves, and that became the foundation of her survival throughout the match. By placing nearly 3/4 of her first deliveries into play, she constantly prevented Andreeva from attacking aggressively off the return. Whenever Gauff landed her first serve, she captured 61% of those points. It was not overwhelming dominance, but it provided enough stability during the most dangerous moments of the contest. Andreeva, on the other hand, landed 66% of her first serves, but only won 52% of those points. Her serve simply lacked the weight and penetration needed to force the American backward, allowing Gauff to neutralize rallies almost immediately with her elite return game. Across the entire match, Gauff won 51 receiving points compared to Andreeva's 42, showing how relentlessly the American pressured every Russian service game and constantly forced the teenager into uncomfortable positions. Yet this is where the numbers become incredibly complicated and even slightly heartbreaking for the young Russian star. The second serve percentages reveal a hidden reality that completely destroys the simplistic narrative that Gauff controlled every baseline exchange throughout the match. Whenever Coco Gauff failed to land her first serve, the entire dynamic of the match immediately shifted. She managed to win only 45% of her second serve points, meaning that every time the American was forced into a vulnerable second delivery, Mirra Andreeva statistically held the advantage in the rally. The young Russian was successfully targeting the exact weakness many opponents have struggled to exploit against Gauff. But the truly shocking numbers appear when examining Andreeva's second serve performance. Despite standing across the net from one of the fastest and most intimidating returners in women's tennis, the 19-year-old Russian captured an impressive 57% of her second serve points. In one of the most pressure-heavy categories on clay courts, she significantly outperformed the world number 3. That statistic completely changes the story of this match. It reveals that once the immediate advantage of the first serve disappeared and rallies evolved into extended baseline exchanges built around patience, spin, positioning, and tactical construction, Andreeva was actually outperforming Gauff from the back of the court. The Russian teenager was controlling neutral rallies with sharper depth, smarter angles, and greater consistency during long exchanges. So if Andreeva was winning so many of the tactical battles from the baseline, why did she ultimately lose the match? The answer exists in the brutal margins that separate victory from heartbreak at the highest level of professional tennis. Gauff's extraordinary 72% first serve percentage protected her from exposing that second serve vulnerability too often. She simply denied the Russian enough opportunities to consistently attack it. Then, when the pressure became unbearable deep in the deciding set, the enormous emotional weight of history finally began affecting Andreeva's mechanics. The Russian committed 6 double faults during the match, compared to 4 from Gauff. Those double faults were not random technical mistakes. They were visible signs of the suffocating pressure Andreeva felt, knowing that anything short of a perfect serve would immediately be punished by Gauff's relentless defense and elite court coverage. The teenager was forced to walk an incredibly dangerous tightrope for nearly 3 hours, and eventually the pressure pushed her off balance. The total points won statistic perfectly captures how unbelievably thin the line between triumph and devastation truly was. Across 3 physically exhausting and emotionally draining sets, Gauff won 102 total points while Andreeva captured 95. After nearly 2.5 hours of brutal tennis, the difference between reaching the semifinals and suffering elimination came down to only 7 points. The difference between advancing deeper into the Italian Open and boarding a flight home ultimately came down to 7 tiny moments. 7 swings of the racket, 7 flashes of hesitation, 7 shots clipping the net cord, and 7 desperate rallies where the American refused to surrender the point. Coco Gauff finished with 16 total games won compared to 12 for Mirra Andreeva, but every inch of that Roman clay felt fiercely contested from the opening serve to the final point. This brutal battle sends a powerful warning across the entire WTA Tour as attention rapidly shifts toward the looming clay court war waiting in Paris at French Open. For Andreeva, the immediate pain of this defeat will be incredibly difficult to process. She had the world number 3 under enormous pressure. She executed a brilliant tactical plan early in the match and proved to herself, and to the entire tennis world, that she can stand toe-to-toe with the sport's elite while matching them shot for shot from the baseline. Yet this heartbreaking loss may become the most important lesson of her young career. She discovered that superior ground strokes alone are not enough to defeat Coco Gauff. To beat her, you need greater mental endurance, stronger lungs, and a willingness to suffer longer than the player standing across the net. Andreeva is no longer simply a talented prospect with future potential. She has become a genuine threat capable of terrifying the very best players in the world. Once she learns how to fully close out matches of this magnitude, multiple Grand Slam titles may eventually follow. The head-to-head record now stands at 5-0 in Gauff's favor, but the gap between them is shrinking faster than ever before. For Gauff, meanwhile, this victory stands as another intimidating example of her championship mentality and relentless competitive spirit. It was not a clean or flawless performance. This match will not be remembered for elegant shot-making or effortless dominance. Her second serve was repeatedly exposed, she lost numerous baseline exchanges, and she found herself staring directly at a fearless teenager determined to overthrow her. Still, Gauff survived. And that ability may be the defining quality separating great players from future legends. True champions find ways to win ugly. They survive when their best tennis disappears. They rely on grit, defense, resilience, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Gauff proved once again that she does not need perfect tennis to defeat elite opponents. She simply needs to remain standing when everything else collapses around her. She drags opponents into the exhausting darkness of a deciding set and forces them to endure a physical and emotional battle few can survive. The lights above the Foro Italico still shine over clay scarred by the slide marks of an unforgettable war. Coco Gauff moves forward into the semifinals bruised, exhausted, but completely unbroken. And with French Open rapidly approaching, she has delivered a chilling message to every contender heading toward Paris. You may overpower her for stretches, you may even take a set from her, but defeating Coco Gauff requires surviving a level of suffering that very few players in the world are mentally prepared to endure. The Queen remains standing, and the road to Roland Garros continues.